Welcome to the Refreshing Leadership Podcast with me, Maya Goodcare. And today I'm excited to bring an end of June review and look forward type episode. So this will be a more personal episode. I will go through my own review questions. I think it's so important to spend time at the end of the first half of the year to do some review and look forward work. I've come up with a few questions. I haven't spent any time preparing the answers. I've just spent some time figuring out some questions that I think would be helpful. So what I invite you to do is, as you listen along, maybe you could pause and think about what your own answers would be if the questions are of interest to you, or you may want to tweak some of the questions. Either way, the idea of this episode is to help you unlock some review and look forward time for what the summer's going to look like, and then also the second half of the year. The first half review can be a missed opportunity when it comes to goal setting. So for those of you who did approach January goal setting with lots of excitement, the magic happens in the messy middle, which is exactly where we are right now. And this is where we can really alter the course and the trajectory of our year, recalibrate if it feels like it's gone a little bit wonky because Q2's just been so busy. This is an opportunity to course correct, and we can end up having the type of year that we wish to have. I'm not here to say we need to achieve all the goals. It might be that you wanted to have a specific word of the year this year and that you've lost sight of that somewhat. So with all of that in mind, let's dive in. I've got a great question to start off with, which is, if January Maya could see June Maya, what would she be most pleased about? Well, January Maya was recovering from a few viruses. My throat was really sore. I was still quite worried about it. I'd had some back-to-back viruses. And in the gym, I was feeling really wonky. I felt like my left side was out of sync with the right side of my body. This is something that I am a little bit prone to. I felt like I'd had a bit of a setback in the gym. I also didn't really have a clear plan in January for what I was going to do from a fitness perspective. And that really came into fruition in February. And I've been really pleased with the progress since then. That has just been about being consistent with 3 sessions a week, and slowly but surely, because I've built in some tiny Pilates exercises into my warm-up, I do feel that I've strengthened internal structure, which we know Pilates can do. But what I didn't have time for was to fit Pilates into my life. You know, I want to strength train, I like to dance, I like to walk, ideally I like to run. And I just do not have time to also fit in Reformer Pilates or Pilates classes. However, doing a few simple exercises like dead bugs or like some bridges at the start or in between strength work, I really do think is responsible for me feeling much better in my body. I really think that how we feel in our body is so foundational. So I'm proud of showing up to the gym even when I wasn't really feeling particularly motivated. In January, I was feeling hugely motivated. In February, I printed out a whole load of sheets where I could track all the weights that I was lifting. And so I've become a lot more intentional about the progressive overload. I've not been outsourcing all of that thinking. I've been owning that process. And it has helped. I do feel strong in the gym, and that spills over into other things. I like to spend a lot of time in the garden, and there's a lot of heavy lifting. And on those things, then I am able to show up strong, which is great. There are other things that January Maya would be pleased about. I think she'd be pleased about all the small trips and social trips and other fun social events, fun dance festivals, a reunion with uni friends, another social trip, a work trip, which has also then ended up being a bit social. And then finally, on the work front, January Maya would be really pleased that even though I wasn't setting out to do anything huge, there have been shifts that are just that sort of quiet build. So for example, I typically describe myself as a C-suite coach, and that's at C-level like O, CIO, CTO. But this half of the year, I've now been being put in front of CEO clients who want coaching. And so I can notice that incremental shift, but it is a completely different coaching conversation that you're having with somebody who is the CEO, and it feels very different and really exciting. There is other stuff on the work front, but I'm just going to leave it there, and hopefully you get the idea that that ability for us to occupy different versions of ourselves as part of this review is really cool. What did I spend a lot of time worrying about that turned out not to matter very much? I have been on a bit of a journey in this first half of the year. Had a couple of situations where I felt that my boundaries were really invaded, and this put me into a state of fight or flight. I found it very stressful, had some sleepless nights, and I have a lot of clients telling me about this state that they're in, and it's probably just been a while that I hadn't been in that state. Realizing what our triggers are, seeing how and observing how I reacted to those was really interesting. And I'm probably still close enough to it that I can't tell you the exact steps that I've taken, but I do know that a few other things have happened more recently, and I can see that I am reacting differently, and in my case, better now. I went through a journey of seeing that I can be prone to overanalysis. I can be prone to overanalyzing kind of relational and social dynamic situations. And whilst that's a good thing in my day job, it's a huge part of the coaching work that I do, is to help make sense of relational matters. All strengths can be overblown, and I found a couple of instances where the overthinking has really kicked in for me. So I did lots of different things. I spoke to friends. Somebody sent me a meditation from Gabby Bernstein, and that reminded me that we need to protect our emotional boundaries. What I learned about myself actually is that I have very clear boundaries, but there are two types of boundaries. There are what we say, and then there's our emotional boundaries, like how we emotionally experience things. And whilst my verbal and task-based boundaries are quite clear, I think I can experience a very strong emotional impact from these situations. And part of this is being highly sensitive. Part of this, I think, is also age. And knowing that about myself, actually learning that I need to protect my emotional boundaries more, has probably been one of the takeaways. There are lots of lovely meditations on Insight Timer, which I found really helpful. I'm a big journaler, and then I have lots of people that I can bounce this stuff off. So it has been many different things that have helped me in this. But going forward, I can see that I intend to spend the second half of this year not in rumination, not getting stuck in thought loops, allowing things to be, in my mind, not right, not as they should be, but not making that my thing to solve. And I spend so much time in coaching, helping people think about their locus of control. What are the things they can impact and what are the things they can't? But it's something that I also need to remind myself of. So that is quite a big one. And I do feel pleased to have gone on that journey, and I can see myself moving through that. And then I can see that there have been a few other little things recently that have not affected me as much, which is great. There's a flip side to being highly sensitive and empathic, and I think this is one of the flip sides, which is that we can end up taking on too much emotionally, and this can really then impact our well-being. So to be able to still have those things that enable me to do my job and be who I am and have that level of sensitivity, but then also know how to look after myself in the process, is really important. The third question in terms of looking back is what has brought me most joy. My first answer here is the garden. I like nothing more than a fairly quiet weekend for me to be in the garden for hours on end, come back looking a little bit bedraggled. My son and daughter will join me outside. Sometimes my husband will be there as well. But just having sort of open time to make magic in the garden has definitely brought me the most joy. And also seeing things come to fruition from the end of last year that we did in the garden, having introduced a lot of plants and new wildflowers and things like that. The other thing that's brought me a lot of joy is the social stuff that I mentioned, especially the trips. I do think that when you get to go away with people, have that more extended social time, or you have a whole day long festival, these are all the really fun things. And then work has been joyous. It's been very intense. There's been a lot of in-person work, especially I did some training around more embodied and constellation and systemic coaching. And then I've been doing so much in-person work that I've been able to put all of that into practice. What does success feel like now compared to 10 years ago? And this is quite fresh from being away for a couple of days. And one of those days I had a bit of time to myself and I got to do some climbing. I was in Edinburgh, so I climbed Arthur's Seat and I also did some other walks. I took time to notice the fact that my son, who's the younger one, has just turned 10. And therefore that's 10 years now of having 2 kids. And it just got me to reflect a little bit because I spend so much time with clients working on their 10-year vision, where I was a decade ago. Well, first of all, I was struggling quite a lot having had the second. Just physically, I felt that my body had fallen apart. So it was a lot of work that went into getting back to feeling strong again and even just being able to run and things like that. So starting with that kind of physical piece. But I was an employee of LBS and little did I know that within a couple of years I would be independent and that I would be out here doing what I'm doing now. Not only that, but we were living in central London. We didn't know where we were going to settle down. We didn't know where our kids were going to go to school. So much more uncertainty at that time, and life just felt harder. Physically, it was harder. 2 young kids and living kind of in central, everything's a little bit more kind of on top of you. And so definitely it wasn't a spacious time of life. In comparison, when I was having these thoughts and sitting on Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh and looking out, it felt very different. So what I would say is that when I think about all the things that have been built, and I have talked about this quite a lot in the last decade, and then I think about what the next decade would look like, I don't think that the next decade will be about the same level of build. I think it will be about deepening my coaching work, deepening my podcast work, deepening my relationships that are important, deepening my connection with nature and the garden, deepening my health and fitness practices. I think it will be more about that than it would be about big changing course and big transformation. However, I do think that when you embark on that type of deepening, I think you can actually get a lot of remarkable transformation because there's the compounding effect, right? There are things that you're doing now, little things that are compounding, just like with money. So there is a point, and I love this, and I don't feel we talked about this properly in economics, but there's a point in investment where the returns from your investment will outweigh the annual contribution that you've set, right? So obviously it depends on the pot and it depends on your annual contribution, but there is going to be a point in the investment journey when that happens. Likewise, when you are doing the things that are aligned with your vision, there is a point at which many of those little things would have built up. And so whilst you continue to take little steps, other things will compound, things will find you. So it should feel quite grounding. It should feel quite easeful. Let's look forward now to what I want the summer to be about. So for me, Q2 has been very fast, and the things that have kept me very busy are things that I like. However, I prefer a slower pace. I looked back at my journal and I wrote about how weirdly much I liked January. So for me, January and February, because I find the pace slow and I love slow pace. That's just how the current version of me is built. And so as much as I really enjoy this, there is some part of me that really needs a kind of a rest. And my idea of rest is not going on a holiday. It is just time to do my life a little bit more slowly. So what do I want the summer to be about? The first word that came to mind was I need it to feel slow. If this summer has moments of slow every day or every week, then that will have been a good summer. Of course, I hope to make lots of memories with the family. We have some trips, but when I think about the overall vibe, I need it to feel lazy. I need it to feel slow. Now, let's think about the second half of the year, right? That we're at that midpoint. When we're in January, we're looking down at a whole year. Half of that is now past. So if the second half of the year went brilliantly, what would actually happen? So while I was away, I realized that I did want to do a party next year, like a birthday party. And I haven't done one. I was meant to do one, and then it was COVID and we were doing the house, and it was just a different time. So that's something that I would really like to do, not this half of the year, but set in motion for next year. Apart from that, if the second half of this year went brilliantly, for me, it's small things. There's a lot of just kind of sticking with stuff. One area that has really fallen off in the busy Q2 is I set up a little small habits log or tracker, and that included the daily delete, spending 5 minutes deleting photos. It's totally fallen off. I'm much more mindful now. As soon as I've taken a good photo or video, whatever, I favorite it. I've made it easier for myself to do this going forward, but the habit has completely fallen off in the mayhem and busyness of the last few months. But there were some others there as well, like having a proper log of my clients and they're, decluttering for 5 minutes a day. I would love to bring those back in, because when those are happening, I do feel grounded. What am I excited about? I do struggle with what I'm excited about, because whilst we have some fun things planned for the second half of the year and trips and things, when I contemplate those, I actually feel a little bit overwhelmed. Once I'm there, I love it. But the bit before, I find it a little bit overwhelming. So I will be excited about getting to those things. But the bit before, I'm not so excited about. I'm excited about more garden time. I really do hope that my estranged gardener returns to me. If you're out there, dear gardener, please come back. The garden misses you. I'm excited about more opportunities to dance. What I'm most excited about is just sort of normal slow, because it's felt like there's been so many different trips and events and things going on. I'm just excited about normal routine. There's a couple of questions here about what deserves more attention and what deserves less attention. What I would say is what deserves more attention is refreshing leadership. So this is a classic situation that I talk about with clients, which is that my day-to-day work, my business as usual versus my needle moving work, which is getting the refreshing leadership business off the ground and launched. And it's very easy when the business as usual stuff is busy for the needle moving work to get put on the back burner or sidelined. And I think in the second half of the year, I would like my business to have more attention. I would like it to have some of that attention that I mentioned earlier in the episode that I had perhaps put to rumination or worry going forward. I would like to take that mental energy and put it into my business. The other bit is what deserves less attention is exactly that. I've noticed my ability now to see a situation, see what's happened, have a response, allow a response, but then not to get stuck into a cycle of rumination. So that type of thing needs less attention for sure. And I can see that happening and I'm excited about that. The other thing that I think deserves less attention, and this is the minute I get overwhelmed and really busy, I take Instagram off my phone. I put the Clear Space app back on, so it's harder for me to access things like WhatsApp, and then the phone gets less attention, which is great. And final question, what would make December feel like a successful ending to the year? If I have managed to do what I've said above, like devote more time to refreshing leadership, continue consistency in some of the areas which I've been really proud of myself around, revisit these habits like photo deletion and other small 5-minute habits, and they could displace some of the more time sucks like social media, time on the phone, time ruminating, then that would be successful. And this reminds me that I'm currently reading Laura Vanderkam's incredible new book called Big Time. Laura Vanderkam was a guest on this podcast and I've been a guest on hers, and sells to us really well the magic of time tracking. So I'm contemplating setting a bit of a goal around time tracking for the second half of this year. If I could time track for the whole half of the year to December, that would feel incredible. And I think based on what she said, it would make a lot of the other things that I want to do feel very possible. So that is one other thing that I would like to add to the picture. So more refreshing leadership, continuation of a lot and building on a lot of the foundations I've laid in the first half, getting back to those initial habits that I spent a lot of time setting up and that have just fallen off in Q2, which is completely fine, right? It was a busy quarter and they're habits that are more suited to perhaps a more slower quarter, or ones that didn't get embedded sufficiently. So I have no problem revisiting those. So I hope that has been helpful. I think it's been helpful for me. I need to re-listen to this and make sure that I actually follow through on a lot of the things that I've said. If you found this helpful, or you know somebody that could benefit from doing this type of thing, perhaps they move really fast through life and they don't stop to take time to smell the roses and look back at their year and recalibrate, then please forward this on to them. And don't forget that you can subscribe on YouTube, lots of videos on there as well, and lots of short clips. So that is the Refreshing Leadership YouTube channel. Do have a subscribe over there. It means that you can watch things with subtitles, and that might be an easier way to digest things sometimes. So I look forward to connecting with you next time. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.